Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Hello.
We're digging into some really core business stuff today, looking at source material all about how businesses are set up, how they're structured.
Yeah, the real foundations.
Absolutely. So if you're trying to get your head around how companies actually work, or maybe you're studying for your IGCSE business exams, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. Today, we're focusing specifically on Part 3 from Unit 1 Business Activity. And that's all about the forms of business ownership.
Foundational stuff, like you said.
It really is. It's like, learning the basic building blocks. You need to understand these structures before you can really analyze anything else in business. Doesn't matter if it's a tiny corner shop or a giant multinational.
Exactly. And today we're looking closely at Chapter 3 from the source material that covers sole traders, partnerships, social enterprises, and franchises. Getting these clear is just vital.
And let's just stress how crucial this is, especially for anyone doing the IGCSE business course. You've got Paper 1 and Paper 2, right?
Right.
Paper 1 often looks at smaller businesses. Paper 2 tackles the larger ones. And guess what? The forms of ownership we're covering today, they're absolutely key to understanding and analyzing businesses in both those papers. You really need to know what kind of beast you're looking at.
Definitely. If you can spot whether it's a sole trader or a partnership, or maybe understand what makes a social enterprise tick compared to a regular company, it just gives you such a better framework for analysis.
So this deep dive is really about helping you study and revise these core ideas thoroughly.
That's the plan.
The main source we're drawing from is a text that breaks down each of these ownership types. It looks at their main features, the pros and cons of each setup, and what makes them work.
We'll be pulling out the key points from that text.
And just a quick note for IGCSE students, if you're looking for extra help, you can always check out www.igcestay-business.weebly.com.
Good resource, that one.
We'll mention it again later. So, okay, let's get into it. We're going to unpack each type, look at what defines them, weigh up the good and the bad points, and really get to grips with that super important idea of liability.
Ah, yes, liability. Who pays when things go wrong?
Yeah.
Crucial.
Exactly. Hopefully you'll have a few aha moments along the way.
Okay, so where do we start? Well, before we jump into the specific types like sole traders and partnerships, our source material highlights a really useful distinction first.
Yeah.
It's the difference between unincorporated and incorporated businesses. Getting this distinction clear really helps understand liability, which, as we said, is a massive factor.
Right. Unincorporated versus incorporated. What's the difference according to the source?
Well, unincorporated businesses, the source says, are ones where there's basically no legal distinction between the owner and the business itself.
So they're like the same thing legally.
Pretty much. The business is the owner. Or, if there's a couple of owners, it's that small group. Everything contracts, debts, assets. It's all done in the name of the owner or owners. And the source mentions these tend to be, smaller operations usually.
Okay, so going back to my example, if I just started selling homemade cookies online under my own name, no fancy company registration, legally, I am the business. My personal finances and the business finances are kind of mixed up.
That's exactly the idea the source puts forward for unincorporated. Now, contrast that with incorporated businesses. The source says these have a separate legal identity from their owners.
A separate legal identity.
Yeah, this is a huge difference. It means a business itself is like a legal person. It can own things, sign contracts, borrow money, sue someone, or be sued, all in its own name, completely separate from the owners. The owners of these are usually called shareholders because they own shares in the company. And the source points out these are often referred to as limited companies. We'll dive deeper into limited companies another time, but it's good to know that term now as the classic incorporated example.
Right. Limited companies. So that separate legal identity, that shield, it sounds important. How does that link back to liability, which you mentioned?
Great question. It links directly. That legal separation, or the lack of it, determines who is responsible for the business's debts. Liability is all about who foots the bill if the business owes money it can't pay.
So if the business fails.
Exactly. Does the debt stop with the business's assets, or can creditors come after the owner's personal stuff, their house, their car, their savings? This separate legal identity is the key difference that dictates whether those personal assets are protected or exposed. And we'll see this is probably the biggest factor when weighing up the pros and cons, especially for the first two types we'll look at.
Okay, that makes sense. The legal structure dictates the risk. Right, let's dive into those specific forms then. Starting with the simplest one, according to the source, the sole trader. sometimes called a sole proprietor.
Okay, sole trader. The source defines this as a business owned by just one person, a single individual.
Just one owner.
Yes, that person is the sole proprietor. But, and this is important, the source points out they don't necessarily have to work alone. A sole trader can employ other people, lots of them, potentially. The key is that the ownership rests with just one individual.
Ah, okay. So one owner, but they could have a whole team working for them.
Correct. The source gives examples across different sectors where you find them. Primary sector, maybe a farmer or fisherman working for themselves. Secondary, like a small builder or craftsperson. And very commonly in the tertiary sector, think small retail shops, hairdressers, tutors, web designers, taxi drivers, garden maintenance services, lots of service providers.
Got it. And the example in the source, Mariana Bello's Cafe in Seville, she started it alone, using her savings and a loan, but then hired 6 part-time staff. She was still a sole trader, though, because she's the only owner.
Precisely. Ownership is the key. Now, the source highlights something that's a massive plus point right away. Setting up as a sole trader is incredibly simple. It states there are no legal requirements to actually establish the business entity itself.
No legal requirements, so you just start trading.
Basically, yes. In many places, you just start doing business, maybe register for tax purposes once you're earning, but there's no complex company formation process.
That sounds like a huge advantage. Quick and easy start.
It is, and it leads into several advantages listed in Table 3.1 in the source. Let's break them down and see why they're advantages.
Okay.
First up, the owner keeps all the profit. Simple as that. After you pay your costs and taxes, every bit of profit belongs to that one owner. The advantage. A really strong, direct reward for your effort and risk. Success means money in your pocket.
Makes sense. Direct incentive.
Second, they are independent. The owner has complete control. Every decision is theirs alone. The advantage here is speed and agility. They can react super fast to changes in the market or customer needs without needing meetings or approvals.
Nimble.
Exactly. Third, as we just said, it is simple to set up with no legal requirements. The clear advantage is saving time, money, and hassle. No lawyers needed just to get started, no complex forms.
Lower barrier to entry.
Fourth, related to control, is flexibility. The source says they can adapt to change quickly. Because it's just one person deciding, they can easily change direction, try new things, tweak the business model, very flexible.
Pivot easily.
Fifth, can offer a personal service because they are small. This often applies to service businesses or small shops where the owner is face-to-face with customers. The advantage. Building strong customer relationships, loyalty, maybe even charging a bit more for that personal touch.
Customer loyal.
And finally, the source mentions they may qualify for government help. Sometimes there are specific grants or support schemes aimed at small businesses or sole traders. So the advantage is potential access to funding or advice that bigger firms might not get.
Okay, those sound really appealing. Keeping all the profit, total control, easy setup. You can see why it's so popular. But there must be downsides, right?
Yeah.
Table 3.1 also lists disadvantages.
Oh, yes, significant ones. And they often stem directly from that single owner structure and the lack of legal separation we talked about earlier.
Okay, what's the main one?
The big one, linking right back to being unincorporated, is they have unlimited liability. This is probably the most critical point to understand.
Unlimited liability.
It means the owner is personally responsible for all the business's debts. If the business goes bust and owes money, creditors, suppliers, the bank, whoever can legally come after the owner's personal assets.
Personal assets.
Okay.
Like their house.
Yes, their house, car, personal savings.
Yeah.
Potentially everything they own is at risk to pay off business debts. It's a huge personal financial exposure.
Wow. Okay, that's a major drawback. What else?
Second, may struggle to raise finance considered too risky by lenders. Banks look at the unlimited liability risk if the business fails. The owner might lose everything, making repayment iffy and the often smaller scale, and just see it as higher risk than lending to, say, a limited company. The disadvantage. It makes it harder to get loans for big investments needed for growth. Expansion can be difficult.
Limits growth potential.
Third, independence may be too much of a responsibility. Yes, control is good, but being the only one responsible for everything, sales, marketing, finance, operations, dealing with problems can be incredibly stressful and lonely. The disadvantage is the sheer weight of responsibility, potentially leading to burnout.
The buck stops entirely with you.
Fourth, long hours and very hard work. Especially at the start, the owner often does everything. The disadvantage is obvious. It can seriously impact your life outside work.
Work-life balance issues.
Fifth, usually too small to exploit economies of scale. They can't buy supplies in huge bulk like big companies, so their cost per item is often higher. The disadvantage is higher operating costs, making it harder to compete on price alone.
Can't get those bulk discounts.
And finally, no continuity, the business dies with the owner. If the sole trader retires, gets sick, or passes away, the business as that legal entity often just stops. It can be hard to sell or pass on because it's so tied to the individual. The disadvantage is the value built up might be lost, and there's no easy succession.
So the business doesn't really exist beyond the owner's involvement.
Okay.
That unlimited liability really is the elephant in the room, isn't it? It puts everything on the line.
It absolutely is. It's the fundamental trade-off for the simplicity and total control. You get all the potential reward, but you also bear all the potential risk personally.
And in terms of documents, the source saying no legal requirements really emphasizes how minimal the paperwork is compared to other forms, right? Just basic trading and tax stuff, probably.
Likely far less formal than incorporated structures.
Okay, so if being a sole trader feels too risky or lonely, maybe teaming up is the answer. Which brings us to the next type, partnerships.
Yes, partnerships. This is where people join forces. The source defines a partnership as existing when between 2 and 20 people own a business together.
2 to 20 owners.
Right. And crucially, they share responsibility for running the business. The source notes they're common in professions like accountants, doctors, estate agents, solicitors, fields where bringing different expertise together is valuable.
Like the examples in the source, Hada Dental Clinic or the Kasuli, Okuma, and Owino accountancy firm.
Precisely. Those illustrate the professional service model often seen in partnerships.
So how about setting one up? Is it as easy as a sole trader? Just get a partner and start.
Well, the source says there are no formal legal formalities generally required. So initially, yes, it can be relatively simple, similar to a sole trader. No big registration hurdles usually. But
There's always a but.
haha, yes. The source immediately adds that partners may produce a deed of partnership, and this is really important.
A deed of partnership. What's that exactly?
It's a legal document, according to the source. Even if it's not strictly required by law to form the partnership, it's highly recommended. It basically sets out the rules of the game between the partners.
Rules like?
The source specifies key things it covers, how much capital each partner puts in, how profits and losses get shared out, what happens if the partnership ends or someone leaves, how much control or decision-making power each partner has, and the rules for bringing in new partners later on.
So even if it's not legally mandatory to start, having that deed is probably essential to stop arguments later. Gets everything clear up front.
Exactly. It clarifies everything: money, power, exit strategies. It prevents misunderstandings and provides a reference point if disputes arise.
Oh.
Now let's look at the advantages from Table 3.2. How does having partners help?
Okay.
First, easy to set up and run, no legal formalities. Again, similar to a sole trader in initial setup, though writing the deed adds a step. Advantage. Still generally quicker and cheaper to start than forming a company. Second, partners can specialize in their area of expertise. If you have, say, 3 partners, one might be great at marketing, one at finance, one at operations. You divide tasks based on skills. Advantage. Leads to better quality work, more efficiency, and less burden on each individual.
Play to strength.
Third, the job of running a business is shared. Addresses that sole trader burden. Workload, stress, decision-making, it's all spread out. Advantage. Less pressure, shared problem solving, cover for each other.
Shared load. Makes sense.
Fourth, more capital can be raised with more owners. Each partner usually brings in some money. So 2 or more people can typically pool more funds than one person alone. Advantage. Allows for bigger initial investments, potentially faster growth.
More starting cash.
Fifth, financial information is not published. Like sole traders, traditional partnerships usually don't have to file their accounts publicly. Advantage. Keeps their financial performance private, away from competitors or public scrutiny.
Okay, those benefits all seem logical. Sharing skills, workload, raising more money. But what about the downsides? Sharing doesn't always go smoothly. What are the disadvantages from Table 3.2?
True. Sharing brings its own challenges. And the big one, again, for most partnerships, is liability.
Here we go again.
Yep. First disadvantage. Partners have unlimited liability. Just like sole traders, in a traditional partnership, each partner is personally liable for all the partnership's debts, not just their share, the whole lot.
So if the business fails, creditors could chase any one partner for the entire debt. even if another partner caused the problem.
Exactly. Your personal assets are fully exposed regardless of who was at fault. It's joint and several liability, as they say. Huge personal risk for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's a biggie. What else?
Second, profit has to be shared. You might generate more profit overall, but it gets split between the partners according to the deed. Disadvantage. Each partner gets a smaller slice of the total pie than a sole trader would from the same profit level.
Less individual gain.
Third, partners may disagree and fall out. Different people, different opinions. Disagreements over strategy, money, or just personality clashes are common. Disadvantage. Conflict slows things down, creates tension, and can even break the partnership apart.
Partnership disputes.
Fourth, any partner's decision is legally binding on all. This is crucial. If your partner signs a contract for the business, even if you knew nothing about it or disagreed, the whole partnership, including you, is legally bound by it. Disadvantage. You lack complete control and are exposed to risks created by your partner's actions.
Oof. Risky reliance on partner's judgment.
And fifth, partnerships still tend to be small. While often bigger than sole traders, they typically don't grow into massive corporations. Disadvantage. Usually limited potential for huge scale or market dominance compared to large companies.
Right. Now, the source mentioned a variation. Limited partnerships. Does that help with the liability issue?
It does, but only for some partners. The source explains that in a limited partnership, you can have partners who just contribute capital and share profits, but don't get involved in actually running the business. These are sometimes called sleeping partners.
Okay, investors, basically.
Right. And these partners can have limited liability. Their risk is capped at the amount they invested. Their personal assets are safe. However, always. The source clearly states that for a limited partnership to exist, at least one partner must have unlimited liability. There has to be at least one general partner who carries the full personal risk for the business's debts.
So it offers protection for passive investors, but someone still has to be on the hook with unlimited liability.
That's the traditional limited partnership structure described. Now, the source also has a key point box mentioning a newer development, particularly in the UK from 2000, limited liability partnerships. LLPs.
LLPs, how are they different?
This is a big step. In an LLP, the source explains all partners have limited liability.
All of them.
Yes. No single partner needs to have unlimited liability. Everyone's personal assets are protected beyond their investment in the LLP itself. But this protection comes with strings attached. The source notes LLPs have more legal requirements, including having to send their financial accounts to the Registrar of Companies, Companies House in the UK, for public inspection.
Ah, okay. So an LLP gives you partnership flexibility and limited liability for everyone, like a company, but in return, you have more paperwork, more regulations, and you have to make your financial information public?
That's the trade-off, precisely. More protection, but more formality and transparency required. So, for documents, a traditional partnership really needs that deed, even if not legally mandated to form, while an LLP, according to the source, has to file accounts, implying a much more formal, documented structure.
Right, that distinction is clear. Okay, let's shift gears to something we see everywhere. Franchises. Fast food coffee shops, gyms, cleaning services, they're all over. What exactly is a franchise structure, based on our source?
Okay, franchises. The source defines this as a setup where one business, the franchisor that's the established company with the brand and the system.
Like McDonald's HQ or Subway HQ.
Exactly. They allow another person or group, the franchisee, to operate a business using their name and selling their products or services. The franchisee is basically buying the right to use a proven business model and recognized brand. The source mentions McDonald's, Subway, Avis Car Rental, and also Huss, a Swedish pet food franchise, as examples.
So the franchisee is essentially running a local branch of the main brand.
In essence, yes. And they get a lot of support from the franchisor to do that. The source lists what the franchise typically receives. First, a license to use the brand name, instant recognition. Second, a startup package help, advice, maybe equipment, branding stuff, the whole setup plan. Third, training on how to run the business the franchisor's way. Fourth, often materials, equipment, and support services needed are supplied or dictated by the franchisor. Fifth, marketing support, often big national campaigns run by the franchisor that benefit everyone. And finally, usually an exclusive geographical area to operate in so they don't compete directly with another franchisee from the same brand next door.
Wow, that's a comprehensive package. It sounds like you're buying a business in a box almost, with training wheels and a support team. Reduces a lot of the guesswork of starting from scratch, surely. But it can't be free.
Definitely not free. The franchisee has to pay for all this. The source mentions several costs. A one-off startup fee to buy into the franchise system, which can be quite large. An ongoing fee, often called royalties, which is usually a percentage of the franchisee's sales revenue paid regularly. And often a contribution to marketing costs for those national campaigns.
Okay, so there's an initial buy-in cost and continuous payments based on how well you do. And how does the franchisor make money? Just from those fees?
Mainly from the fees, yes. But the source also notes that franchisors often make a profit on the materials, equipment, and merchandise they supply to the franchisees. Franchisees are usually required to buy key supplies through the franchisor to ensure consistency, and the franchisor can add a markup.
Ah, okay, so fees plus profits on supplies. Right, let's look at the advantages and disadvantages now using Table 3.3. And this is interesting because we need to look at it from both sides, the franchisee buying in and the franchisor selling the rights. Let's start with the franchisee. What are the advantages for them?
Okay. Advantages for the franchisee. First, less risk, a tried and tested idea is used. You're not launching something completely new. You're using a model that's already worked elsewhere. Advantage. Higher probability of success than starting an independent business from zero.
Proven concept.
Second, backup support is given. Training, ongoing advice, operational help from the franchisor. Advantage. You're not alone. You have expert guidance and resources to draw on.
Help is available.
Third, setup costs are predictable. The franchisor usually provides detailed cost breakdowns for the setup package. Advantage. Makes financial planning easier and reduces unexpected startup expenses.
Clearer budgeting.
Fourth, national marketing may be organized. Big advertising campaigns funded collectively or by the franchisor build brand awareness. Advantage. Attracts customers to your location without you having to fund large-scale marketing yourself.
Brand recognition boost. Like, those are compelling reasons to buy a franchise. What about the downsides for the franchisee?
Okay. Disadvantages for the franchise. First, profit is shared with the franchisor. Those ongoing fees and royalty payments mean you don't keep all the money your business earns. Advantage. Your potential profit margin is lower than if you owned an independent business making the same revenue.
Sharing the earnings.
Second, strict contracts have to be signed. The franchise agreement dictates almost everything about how you run the business. Advantage. Very little independence or flexibility. You have to follow the rules precisely.
Tied to the rules.
Third, linked to that, lack of independence, strict operating rules apply. You can't just change the menu, the decor, or the operating hours if you feel like it. You run their system, their way. Advantage. Can be frustrating if you're entrepreneurial and want to innovate or adapt locally.
Limited freedom.
Fourth, can be an expensive way to start a business. The initial franchise fee plus the costs of fitting out the premises to the franchisor's standards can add up to a very large upfront investment. Advantage. Requires significant capital, often more than starting a similar independent business.
High entry cost. Okay, so it's a trade-off for the franchisee. Less risk and more support, but less freedom and shared profits. Now, let's flip it. What about the franchisor? Why do they do it? What are their advantages?
Advantages for the franchisor are mostly about rapid, lower-risk expansion. First, fast method of growth. Selling franchises allows them to open many locations quickly across a wide area. Advantage. Quickly builds market presence and brand recognition much faster than funding company-owned stores.
Rapid expansion.
Second, cheaper method of growth. The franchisees provide the capital to open and run the new outlets. Advantage. The franchisor needs much less of their own money to expand the network.
Uses franchise capital.
Third, franchisees take some of the risk. If one particular location fails, the main financial loss falls on the franchisee, not the franchisor's central business. Advantage. Spreads the financial risk of individual store failure across the network.
Risk diversification.
Fourth, franchisees more motivated than employees. Because they've invested their own money and own the local business, franchisees usually work incredibly hard to make it succeed. Advantage. Often leads to better run, more profitable individual units compared to relying solely on salaried managers.
Motivated owner-operators.
Yeah.
Right, so it's a smart way for the franchisor to grow big, fast, and relatively cheaply. But what are the drawbacks for the franchisor?
Disadvantages for the franchisor often revolve around control and profit sharing. First, profit is shared with the franchisee. They only get the fees and supply margins, not the full profit from each successful location. Disadvantage. Lower potential profit per outlet compared to owning it directly. The source actually lists this twice, emphasizing the point. Potential profit is shared with franchisee.
Less profit per store.
Second, franchisees may damage brand's reputation. A poorly run franchise with bad service reflects badly on the entire brand everywhere. Disadvantage. Significant risk to the overall brand image, which is hard to control directly across hundreds or thousands of locations.
Brand risk.
Third, franchisees may get merchandise from elsewhere. If controls aren't tight, franchisees might buy cheaper, non-approved supplies to cut costs, which can affect quality and consistency, plus the franchisor loses the profit margin on those supplies. Disadvantage. Potential loss of quality control and revenue.
Maintaining standards is key.
Fourth, cost of support for franchisees may be high. Providing all that training, marketing, operational support, and quality checks for a large network requires a significant ongoing investment by the franchisor. Disadvantage can be a substantial overhead cost.
Supporting the network costs money.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really is a complex relationship with trade-offs on both sides.
Yeah.
Support versus control, risk versus reward, and liability. The source doesn't assign a specific liability to the franchise model itself, does it? It depends on the underlying structure of the franchisee and franchisor.
That's right. The franchisor is usually a limited company, so it has limited liability. The franchisee could be operating as a sole trader, unlimited liability, a partnership, usually unlimited liability, or they might have formed their own limited company, limited liability, to run the franchise. The franchise agreement itself doesn't determine the liability. The legal structure chosen by each party does.
Got it. And the key document is that strict contract, the franchise agreement.
Absolute crucial document in this structure.
Okay, let's change direction completely now. We've talked about businesses focused primarily on profit. What about social enterprises? These sound different.
They're fundamentally different in their purpose. The source defines social enterprises as businesses that have an environmental or social well-being aim at their core.
So their main goal isn't profit.
Not primarily for the owners, no. Their main goal is to improve human or environmental well-being. The source describes them generally as not-for-profit or non-profit organizations, even though they operate using business methods.
Interesting. What are their key features then, according to the source?
The source lists several. First, they have a clear social and/or environmental mission. That's their reason for existing. Second, they generate income through trade or donations. They might sell things or services like a regular business or rely on donations or a mix. Third, crucially, they reinvest most of their profits back into achieving that mission. Any surplus isn't paid out to owners, it fuels the cause. Fourth, their majority controlled by the interests of the social mission decisions prioritize the mission's impact. And fifth, they are accountable and transparent.
Accountable and transparent. What does that mean in practice?
The source explains transparency means they're open about their actions and impact, willing to explain themselves and use clear language. Accountability means taking responsibility for the effects of what they do.
So they make money through business activities, but that money serves the mission, not owners. And they're open about how they do it.
Precisely. Business tools for a social purpose. The source gives a couple of main types. One is cooperatives. These are owned and controlled by their members.
Members, like customers or workers.
Can be either or others. Members buy shares, get voting rights, elect directors. Any profit is often shared back with members based on how much they use the co-op or reinvested. Examples include consumer cooperatives, like a food co-op where members get better prices, and worker cooperatives, owned and run by the employees themselves.
Okay, co-ops. What's the other type mentioned?
Charities. These are organizations focused on raising money for good causes, helping the poor, sick, animals, the environment, etc. They mainly rely on donations. The source mentions Age UK and Save the Children as examples. They also do important work raising awareness and campaigning.
And that Save the Children pie chart in the source, showing where their money comes from, 58% individuals, 25% institutions, etc. That's a perfect example of the transparency you mentioned, right?
Absolutely. It shows exactly how they're funded, demonstrating that accountability and openness that's characteristic of well-run social enterprises and charities. It builds trust with donors and stakeholders.
Right. Now, for social enterprises generally, the source doesn't list specific pros and cons of the structure itself, like it did for sole traders or partnerships, does it? It focuses more on their purpose.
That's correct. The focus is on what they are and what they do, rather than a simple advantage-disadvantage list for the legal form itself. Similarly, there's no single liability definition or list of required documents for social enterprise as a category in the source, because they can take various legal forms. Some might be unincorporated associations, some registered charities with specific rules, some might even be incorporated companies, like companies limited by guarantee. Their specific legal structure determines liability and paperwork, which is beyond this chapter's scope.
Okay, The source also brings things back together by looking at large versus small businesses, linking it to these ownership forms.
Yes, it makes the point that the structures we've focused on today, sole traders, partnerships, franchises, social enterprises, are most likely to operate as small businesses.
Most likely, but not always.
Right. Sole traders are almost always small. Partnerships, especially professional ones, tend to be small to medium.
Okay.
Franchises are interesting. The franchise running the local outlet, often a small business. But the franchisor, the main company, frequently very large, often incorporated.
So small operators within a big system.
Exactly. And social enterprises, as we saw with Save the Children, can range hugely, from tiny local community projects right up to massive international charities or large cooperatives, so they're not always small either.
This size point is really useful for linking back to the IGCSE exam, isn't it? Paper 1 focuses on investigating small businesses.
Where you'll see lots of sole traders, partnerships, maybe individual franchisees.
And Paper 2 investigates large businesses.
Where you might analyze a big franchisor or a large national or international social enterprise.
So understanding these forms, their features, pros, cons, and especially that liability aspect gives you the tools to analyze any of these businesses, whatever their size, for those exam papers.
Absolutely. It's the analytical toolkit you need for those case studies. Knowing the structure helps you understand the context, the risks, the likely priorities.
Okay, let's do a quick check then. A few multiple choice questions from the end of the chapter in the source, just to see if things have clicked. Ready?
Let's try them.
Question 1. Which of the following is an advantage of a sole trader? A, limited liability. B, more capital can be raised in a partnership. C, unlimited liability. Or D, independence for owners.
Okay, well, A is wrong. They have unlimited. B is wrong. Partnerships usually raise more. C is a disadvantage. So based on our discussion in Table 3.1, the advantage is D, independence for owners.
Correct. Question 2. Having a clear social and/or environmental mission is the feature of which business structure? A, franchise. B, sole trader. C, social enterprise. Or D, partnership.
That defining feature, the core mission, that points directly to C, social enterprise.
Yep. Question 3. A fast method of growth is a key advantage for which business structure? A, franchisor. B, partnership. C, franchisee. Or D, social enterprise.
Right. Who benefits from rapid expansion using others' money? That's the main company selling the rights. So it's an advantage for the A franchisor.
Exactly. And question 4. Taking risk in business is a key role of which of the following? A, accountant. B, entrepreneur. C, company director. Or D, marketing manager.
Thinking back to the characteristics mentioned in the unit, the person who spots the opportunity and takes the financial risk to start the venture is the B, entrepreneur.
Perfect. Okay, so we've really dug into these core forms of business ownership from the source material today.
We have sole traders, partnerships, including those variations like LLPs, franchises from both sides, and social enterprises like co-ops and charities.
We've looked at their key features, the pros and cons, that critical difference between limited and unlimited liability, and touched on documents like deeds and contracts, all based on that source text.
And understanding these structures really is fundamental. Knowing how they're set up, how they run, who carries the risk, it equips you to analyze pretty much any business you come across.
Whether it's for your exams or just understanding the world, it helps you see why businesses operate the way they do, why they face certain challenges or enjoy certain benefits.
And that liability difference is probably the single most important distinction to remember when comparing them. Unlimited liability puts your personal world on the line. Limited liability protects it, but often comes with more rules.
Entrepreneurs are risk takers, as the source notes, but the structure they choose massively affects how much personal risk they're taking.
Absolutely. A calculated risk versus betting the farm, potentially.
So for everyone studying IGCSE business, keep coming back to these ideas. Use the source material, look at real businesses around you, and try to figure out why they chose their particular structure.
And don't forget that website for more resources, www.igces-business.weebly.com.
So next time you're out and about, look at the shops, the services, the charities. Think, is that a sole trader? A partnership? A franchise branch? A social enterprise?
And then think, what does that structure tell me about their likely goals, the risks they face, how they make decisions?
That's your provocative thought for today. How does that basic choice of ownership structure shape everything else a business does?
Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into business ownership. We hope it's helped clarify these important structures.
Indeed. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.